Hey guys, I'm back for another code review video. This is one it's a variation on at the end of level 10. There are two challenges. One that's called buying inventory, um, where you pick an item and then it just tells you the price. And then there's a follow on with that that's discounted inventory, where you enter in your name and then it gives you a discount if your name matches some hard coded value. I had a reader who did that and then got into the next chapter. Level 11 is about loops, and said, well, why not make this happen repeatedly until they're, done asking for values. And they also wanted to add in an extra bit, which was being able to ask for multiples of an item to kind of turn it into more of like a game shop inventory interaction. And I love the idea. This reader got to a point where they said, I don't quite know what to do. And then they went to ChatGPT and said, hey, ChatGPT, help me do this, which threw a bunch of stuff at them. So this is the code that the reader believes more or less accomplishes what they were trying to do. Basically, tell me an item, pick an item, and I'll tell you the price. And tell me an item, tell me how many you want, and I'll tell you the total cost. And I'll keep doing that until you say you're ready to be done. And to do that in as simple of a way as possible, because as he got the response back from ChatGPT, he's like, wow, this feels really complicated. I feel like there's a lot to learn. And so he kind of took bits and pieces of what ChatGPT said, along with the original starting point, and just kind of went from there. I think this is a really good, I think this is really, this challenge, a lot of it comes up a bunch. I think this is a really interesting variation on it. So I wanted to spend some time trying to accomplish work with this code and kind of do what I would do in this case if there is some sort of need or desire to do this and keep the code simple. I'll also say that I'm going to modify the code to only include things that are in the book by chapter 11, by level 11. So if there's anything in here that ChatGPT threw in that the book hasn't covered yet, I'm going to remove. Before I dive into that, I do want to mention just kind of a caveat or a thing to think about if you ever use ChatGPT. And I said this in the Discord server in response to all this, is anytime you go online and look for help on any problem, you got to keep in mind that your journey is a very personal journey. ChatGPT doesn't know, it's not on the same journey as you. Some other, Stack Overflow answer, it's not, those people aren't on the same journey as you. And so it's really easy for these things to just use a bunch of stuff that you weren't aware existed. And to be, it can be kind of overwhelming when you're like, well, how do I solve this? And you go Google it and it's like, I don't know what any of this does. So just keep that in mind when you go to, for example, ChatGPT. It doesn't understand your personal journey. It doesn't know where you're at. And so it's just really easy for it to overload you with new topics. The second thing I want to mention is that what we're trying to accomplish here, there are tools that you will learn in the future that would make this code cleaner, simpler, better, all the good qualities. We're honestly, at this point, we're still early on in the journey. There's a lot more to learn, and it is 100% true that, for example, the things I think of with this code are methods and classes. If we knew how to make those, this code gets a lot simpler. But we're not going to do that right now. We're just going to stick with what's available in level 11. All right, so I'm going to just kind of go through this. So this is right now, let's see, there's 234 lines of code, and I'm just going to start by doing a bit of cleanup in here. And the first thing I'm going to do is, I think this person has gone through and outlined, I mean, this is pulling in some of the samples from the code and just kind of defining in their own mind how this stuff works. I think that's a fantastic thing to do. But of course, for doing this challenge, I don't need to maintain that. So I'm going to get rid of it. The next thing here is This stuff here is boilerplate that often comes in with a new file, but modern C Sharp. So first of all, we're not using anything in system.threading.tasks. We're not using anything in system.componentmodel.design. We're not, for right now. Yeah, basically the only thing that we're actually using would be system. None of the rest of the stuff is getting used here. And you can still see that this is like faded out. And I guess like I just copied the CS code, the C# code into here. This might depend on your project configuration, but for the most part, a new C# project will include a handful of global using directives, and that includes systems. So you don't need to put this one in either. So I'm going to remove that. Now we're down to less total code. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I know down here there was some white space that wasn't really serving a purpose. This is minor, but maybe I have OCD or something. I hate this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to clean that up. It's just less stuff. And like you could even see there was a bunch of like empty lines at the bottom. That's easy to miss. But I like having that cleaned up. So there, poof. Now my white space seems to be like it's in order. Oh man, it's scrolling weird. What's going on? Yeah, so that is here's another. Every once in a while I end up with a place with 2 blank lines, but that's usually not needed. I'm going to delete this comment. I'm pretty sure this comment and this comment as well are both there. Basically, it's communication to me, or like they posted this on the Discord server, and so this was stuff that anybody who's looking over this was communication to them. I don't need to maintain that. Just a minor thing. Like, again, this is mostly personal, but I will say that like I would rather put this comment here than like between the on its own line under this, or I would rather put it before it. Like I would usually put the comment immediately before a block, and block's not quite the right word for it. Like I mean it is a block of code, but I don't mean to imply like a block statement like these curly braces are, right? Like that's a block statement. That's like I don't mean to imply a block statement, but just a chunk of code. I'll usually put it if it's a comment for the entire block, I'll usually put it just before it on its own line. If it's a comment about, and especially if it's like minor supporting information for some single line, then I'll put it over here on the end. So that's usually my preference, but in this case, I'm not going to worry about maintaining that. I think there's some weird white space going on here. Let's make sure that's aligned. Another thing here is that the way this is set up, like this works, like in this case, so an if statement is if parentheses some Boolean condition and then the embedded statement. And so in this case, this is the embedded statement, and this is like indented well. But it always, again, it's just one of those things that for me, what I do and we're talking anyway, just to keep the code clean. Like if the stuff is like a complicated thing, I'll typically put in curly braces because it makes it a little easier to see. Now I will often do something like for int x equals 0, x less than 10, x plus plus. Or int y equals 0, y less than 10, y plus plus. Console.write line. Like something like that. Like I'll write code like that, but again, like this is because, and some people will always put the curly braces on here once you've got more than one line. I feel okay with this the way that was, where it's like if, and then it's like this giant like multi-line thing that it's a little hard, especially with those curly braces and stuff. It's a little hard to like spot how that worked, given that this do while is a multi-line thing. I don't know. Like I said, a minor thing, but for me, I like it. Like if I'm gonna do that, then I like the curly braces in there. Um, I'm gonna delete this comment as well. But what I'll say is that yes, this comment is correct. So if you um, this right here is not a variable declaration. It's just an assignment. This item selection up here uh, declares it and then assigns a value to it as well. So it initializes it here. If you say something like int, put that in here, even if you didn't have this up here, then the scope for this variable, like the place where this name is valid, is from wherever it is declared until the end of like the block that it's in, which in this case is right here where this curly brace is. So the whole scope, the place that that item selection variable is visible, is just from here to here, which isn't much of anything at all. So like you can see now, like all of these down here are out of scope. And that's what it says. It doesn't exist in the current context. It's no longer visible because it's just, it isn't there. But if I put this in here and do this, now this guy's scope is technically from here again to the end of the block, which in this case is the end of this else if. So that's way down here. So like as a really big chunk, right? So yeah, I'm going to delete that as well. There's also a number of these places in here where it's like extra parentheses. I'm going to clean those up. I saw more of that down here somewhere too. These right here. Yeah. Now let's see. So we're like what we're looking for here are things that feel like they're adding a lot of weight that maybe aren't adding a lot of value, right? So like this little section in here is definitely like this is a lot of lines to just display. Like we're only going to get into here or here or here or here, right? And that feels like it's kind of heavy. So maybe we'll do something about that. I think this is interesting in that it is. So first of all, this is like the price is 10, which is the same as it was up here. So there's some like duplication there. Like we see the price up here, but then like also there's like a price down here. And then like it's also interesting that like this the names these variables like one rope and but we're all like this is actually the cost after multiplying by however many we asked for. And that feels a little weird, so maybe we can do something about that. And then there's all this stuff here that is like once you get down here, like if you look at these, I think this is, I may not have time to, because I don't want these videos to be excessively long. I may only have time to go through, one thing, and maybe this is it. Like there's a lot here. Like all of these case blocks feel very, very similar, right? So let's see what we can do about that. Of course, the first thing I think of is I look at these and I say, well, hey, look at this. Like most of this code is identical. So that means we can reuse stuff. Like, in fact, the only difference between these cases is the first line. You've purchased some amount and then like the final cost, and then literally just this word right here. Everything else is the same. Thank you for your patronage. Press any key to exit. Console.read key, environment.exit. And And this the exact same thing here. It's the exact same thing here. It's the exact same thing here. It's the exact same thing here and here and here. And then we get to here. And this breaks the pattern. This default, like we don't have that many. So if you know, depending on the item type, we say, actually that's interesting. Item selection. This was the original value, right? Yeah, so this is the quantity. This is the chosen item. So if it weren't for this default, this like this says we don't have that many, but in this case, it's not a number. It's we don't this should be, this is about like we don't have that item, right? I think. And although I will say that in theory, we would have already hit this. All right. There's a part of me that wants to say, you know what? Forget this. We don't need to worry about that. The catch is I did want to try and keep their code intact. So I'm doing that, but I'm hesitating to do that. Like that might give us a justification for, you know, other code. Oh, that's probably a mistake as well. Oh wait, there's a couple of these that are. Okay, there we go. Fixed. So I'm trying to think where the best place to go here is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, so we've deleted, temporarily ignoring that last, like, what if something else was chosen besides that? What I'm going to do is just say, well, since everything else is the same, I'm going to just cut these lines here. I guess I need the break, right? Break. And then come down here and just stick everything that's shared. So now all this code here is shared for all of them. And I'm just going to just do a little bit of cleanup here. And that's like this type of things. Like when the code is 100% identical and you have, you know, like 2 paths or 5 paths, in this case, there were like 7 paths that all branch off and do their own thing. And then they come back together. Like when there's duplicate code at the end or at the beginning of that, it's really easy just to move it before they split up or after they split up. And so that's what I've done here is I don't need that break. In fact, I don't want that break because that would break out of, I think, the outer loop. Actually, though, now that I think of that, if I did break out of the outer loop, hang on a sec, that might actually make things even easier. What is that going to break out of? Let's see. I've got this. So the break, you can't break out of an if. So it would break out of this. The reason I say that is like we have this environment.exit 0 and I actually think that are there any other breaks in here? So these breaks get out of the switch. Yeah, that break. So I don't, that's the only, okay. So again here, like every time we, so the only times we like exit the program, we actually could replace this with a break, right? And then I'm just going to move this out and put this down here after the loop. So now we have this stuff here that says press any key to exit. console.read key. I'm trying to remember if console.read key has been covered or not yet in here. But I guess I'll say a couple of things here. Is since environment.exit's now the last line of the program, there's no point in keeping that in there. We're going to exit now anyway because we've reached the end of the program. I'll also say that this stuff here, when you run a program from Visual Studio, it does that anyway. Like it'll like say, oh hey, the console. In fact, let's just run this really quick and maybe I can just show it. Rope. Oh, yes. 1. Yes. How many would you like? 4. 4 ropes for $40. So thank you. This is the code that I was just messing with. And then this comes up here where it like keeps this open. It says press any key to close the window. So there is an argument that maybe I don't even need to add this stuff in here. However, I'm going to leave it in there. I think it's fine. The other part here is that this, like, since we're here, we can simplify this. This break gets us out, and it, like you can see, like this is highlighting. It's grayed this out and says you don't need to do this. It's not used any. Like once you do this, we just leave. And so what I'm going to do is not like it's saying I don't need to do that. Value assigned is not used in any execution path. So I can just not do that. And then one thing that's interesting here is this continue selecting. I think that the only time, yeah. So this is initialized here. Let's go through this. The only time this is initialized, the only time this is used is right here where we initialize it to true. And then we check it here. And then we set it to true here. So now at this point, we never, it'll always be true. The only so why do anything? We can actually just replace this with, what I'll do is instead of using a variable, since like we either just break out of the loop completely or we just always go on to the next loop, I actually can just replace this with a continue. And then up here, I can just say while true. So I think that simplifies the code a little bit in that basically we're just going to say like, assume we're going to loop forever. That's what while true does. We're going to run through this kind of indefinitely, but eventually we end up right here and we say, that's enough. We can be done. Now actually look, this is like graying this stuff out and I'm saying, you don't need to do this, because what I can do is I can say, because what happens is one of 3 things will happen. Either it'll be yes, and we'll just make another pass, or we'll say no, and we'll escape the loop, or it'll be, there's an implicit else here. It'll be something else, and we'll just fall out of these loops, and then fall out of these if statements, this if statement, this if statement, and just end up looping again. So in theory, and I'll say that like this logic, partly I'm seeing this because Visual Studio is helping me. Having the right tools in the IDE make a big difference. But in addition to that, these are the kinds of things that with practice, and it might be a lot of practice, you start to see them yourself. You're like, oh, this logic feels overdone. So what can we do to simplify it? Well, all we're really saying here, like the only time, regardless of whether you typed yes, no, or if you typed maybe, in every case except the no, we're just going to keep going. So technically that means that I could just change it into this. If they ask for, another item, then bail, exit this loop. Otherwise, it's going to automatically run the loop again, right? Now I'm going to remove the curly braces on this. And I actually, some people hate that. I'm fine with it. So I think that's, for me, that's simpler. Somebody else might say, no, I want the curly braces. I want the extra line. For me, if the condition is short enough and the embedded statement here is simple enough. I don't have any problems personally with putting them all on one line. I think that reads pretty well. Not everybody agrees with that. That's okay. If you don't agree with that, then put it on another line, add the curly braces, whatever. Now, I still wanted to, that was all kind of a distraction. This code here is fairly complicated. It's not complicated. It's just that, again, like there's a lot of duplicate. Like the only part here that's actually different is the name of the thing that we're doing and the variable that we're using here. What I think I want to do, like I said, it's interesting that these are like, we do the math here for however many they said. We do the math for the total cost if it were ropes, the total cost if it were torches, the total cost of its climbing equipment, the total cost if it's water, the total cost of its machines. Like we do the math here for regardless of what it is. And I guess I'd like to see if there's a way to not do all that math over and over again, and to I guess to just use one variable here. Except, so like maybe what I'll do is I'm gonna, like I said, there's a lot of duplication in here. Like the break is duplicated, which is fine. At the console.writeLine is duplicated, but this duplication it's not identical. So it's not so easy to just be like, oh, we just move this out. This is harder. Like has to be a part that is unique. And so I already know what I want to do with this, and that is, like I said, the difference here is this part here, and this text here. So what I want to do is something like this: string item description equals, and I'm going to use a switch expression. Because those tend to be a lot less like complicated, like less code, less whatever. But they are like, because they're an expression, they can feel a little complicated. And a lot of people, if you've done programming in other languages, most programming languages have something like a switch. Many do not have a switch. Many programming languages have a switch statement. Not every language has a switch expression. I mean, C# didn't have a switch expression until, I don't know, it's been a number of years now, but switch statements like this one down here existed in C# since day one. Switch expressions are, it might have been C# 8 or 9 or something like that, like comparatively new. But so now if I just do 1, then we're going to do ropes, 2, torches, 3, set. The thing that it had is sets of climbing equipment, which makes sense because otherwise it'd be like climbing equipments, 3 climbing equipments. Maybe this one has that same thing. 6 food supplies. I mean, like this will give us the same text that existed before, so like it's going to be like it's a reasonable refactoring. But maybe what if we just called this meals? I like that phrasing. It differs a little bit from the book. Now the catch, of course, is like at this point now I could come in here and I could say item description and replace all of these. So the code now is closer to being the same, but we still have this, like, if it's ropes, then we're doing one rope. If it's torches, we're doing, one it's, we use a different variable here. What I'm gonna do is int total cost equals item selection switch. And now right in here, so I'm having a second switch, right? One. So if it's ropes, then quantity requested times 10. 2, quantity requested times 5. Actually, you know what? So I mean, this is fine. Okay, I'll just finish this thought and then all right. Okay, something like that. So now I have my total cost, and now, so basically, I've taken all these little expressions that were here, and rather than doing all of them for all scenarios, I'm just computed it. Basically, I'm only going to run one of these, which I think is like, it's going to be slightly faster, because with this code, regardless of which item I picked, I compute the total cost for what if it were ropes, what if it were torches, what if it was climbing equipment, what if it was water. And this version now only does the calculation for the one thing that it's actually for. But I will say that, like, yes, it's faster, but like, we probably saved, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instruction cycles. Like, we saved ourselves 6 cycles. This hardly matters. Like, it's more efficient, but like, not in a way that anyone's going to notice, especially when we have so much of this code as user input. Your program is going to spend, it's not just like 99.9% of its time. It is like, the amount of time that it spends doing math in this case is like nothing. Like, it really, like, it's not going to matter in this particular case, because there's so much user input going on, and these are straightforward multiplication. So don't get too carried away with performance optimizations, but it will be more optimal. Now, so now I don't need to do this anymore. And now down here, I can just use the same total cost. So we just, regardless of, oops, wow. I can just replace all of these, and hopefully you can see where this is going. Now all of that is exactly identical. So at this point, I can just, it doesn't matter where I ended up, I'm just going to do this one thing. So I can replace the entire switch with that one line. And that makes, I think, a really big difference. The next thing I'm going to do is, like, again, duplication in here, right? What I want to do is do this. Int, I'm going to kind of split this up. So I'm going to say int total cost equals quantity requested times item cost. And then I'm going to make this be item cost. So for a single item, or just one of them, poof. I'm going to tweak my white space here. Now it's a little easier to see that. All right, there. Now, we're making progress. One thing I will say here is, given the tools we have in chapter 11, level 11, like there, like I said, duplication, right? Like you can see, like there's mirrored, the structure of this thing looks like the structure of this thing. What if we didn't have to have two switches that like more or less looked the same? If we had, there are other tools that are coming, and the things that I can think of are, if we had tuples, I would use a tuple here and just have one switch, or like a record or a class or something like that. So if I had all the C# tools available to me, I could get rid of this. As it stands, like we're just gonna need basically this, because we have to, we got it. There's two different things that we're computing. I do want to quickly show like what this could look like if we use tuples. Is we would just put two variables there, and then we just like do that and that and so on. And now I'm done, right? Like, so with a tuple, we can like give the name and then the value. And what I'll say is that if I like, you could go even farther and make a class or a record to store like an item, an item type, and like maybe the human readable like description of the thing, and the cost of it. Like you could make a type definition for this and then use that instead. And that I like a lot better. But again, we don't have classes, we don't have records, we don't have tuples. So it will get better. You will eventually learn all the tools needed. But for right now, this is duplication that we'll live with, and it's okay. It's fine. Like I said, it's really not so bad. Now, here's the other part: is this like this stuff here is essentially also identical, right? So now we have the cost is expressed right here, but it's also written up here. So what would we need to do in order to like combine those? Because I think at this point, a lot of this code down here, I'm honestly pretty satisfied with, right? Well, you know what? One thing I'll also do here is I'm just gonna make it lower right here. So now I don't need to call two lower down here. So this tells you, a single item, it's this much. And it would just be nice if we could like somehow weave this into this, because essentially a lot of this stuff is the exact same stuff as this down here, right? Like especially with how we split that up, where now like the total cost is here. So like this stuff, none of this code here is based on the quantity. So maybe we can just move this up. How hard is that going to be? If we just say, I mean, I'm gonna just drop it in here for the moment. I think everything's still intact. But what we want to do is take this. So this says rope cost this. Climbing equipment costs this. Clean water costs this. Um, but like I said, this 15 is that because of exactly this 15. So what would be nice, I'm going to move this up a little bit farther, up above this. And now, in theory, we ought to be able to do something like this. Item description. Missing. Item description costs. Item cost. Right? So like, if they entered 1, then coincidentally, that's exactly, if it's this, then it'll be that. Now, by the way, that basically this menu here is like singular, clean, like, well, I guess it isn't. Can you, food supplies? It's like, I guess I need to tweak some of these so that they're still like grammatically correct. But the idea, and I'm not going to take this all the way to completion here, but hopefully you can start to see that like we can do, it's the same, it's going to be the same pattern regardless of what it is. It's going to be, well, whatever the item description up here was, it costs this much. Like I said, this version up here is plural. Some of these down here are singular. This, I guess it's not, I mean, it's like, there's a word for that. I don't remember what it is in English. And by that, I shouldn't, like, I don't know it in French or German or Japanese or anything either. I just, from like English classes, grammar classes, I don't remember what it's called, but there's a word for it. Anyway, point is like all of these are going to end up looking exactly like this, and they'll just coincidentally be right because when we fall into the case 5 like arm of the switch here, we will have also gone into the 5 arm here and the 5 arm here and have set those up correctly. So of course, again, I'm going to ignore this default. We maybe shouldn't completely ignore it, but one thing I will say, and I've said this in a lot of these videos, at this point in the book, bad user input, we don't have all the tools needed to handle all ways that users could enter stupid stuff. In production code, like if you're building an application that you have 1 million users, you better handle user input well. But in this case, the stakes are super low. The only user is you. And you're either going to get it right because you wrote the code, it's going to do it. Or, again, the stakes are low, and worst case scenario, you've got to run it again. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world. So it's not unreasonable to say, who cares about the user input? It's not like, you don't have to make these challenges harder for yourself than is necessary. With that said, it's not unreasonable in this case to say to handle, oh, there's, they didn't choose anything good, like try again. And if I have time, I'm going to come back and handle that. If I don't have time, I won't. But like that's not unreasonable. Anyway, the point is now with what we've got, of course, all these switches are exactly identical. And so we can just do this instead of all of that. I will say, like in this case, we've structured everything to use like this correct singular, or like that, like here, everything here is plural. If we wanted a singular and a plural version, Um, like we could add another switch that mirrors these and have like the singular and the plural version. And so we just have three switches to compute three different values: the singular, the plural, and the cost. Alternatively, like I said, when we have tuples or classes, we just maybe make one switch and just have all that information in there. Um, so there's definitely like if we need it, if we really want, like I don't feel the need to maintain two of these, but if we wanted to, we could do that. Additionally, and this is a bit of a stretch, there are libraries out there. There's one that I actually reference in the book. It's late in the book. It's called Humanizer, that you can actually like give it text like this and say, hey, make this singular. And so like in theory, we'd be able to just like, if we wanted to do it singular, we could like pass it to this library that just does this stuff for us. That kind of thing is not perfect. It's either like using a table to like look up like what's the plural, what's the singular of these things, but it's exactly the kind of thing that runs a risk of getting the whole Dan Quayle thing. And I'm probably dating myself by saying Dan Quayle, but Dan Quayle got in all sorts of trouble once for telling an elementary school kid that the correct spelling of potato, plural, is that, singular is that. In not that I care to defend Dan Quayle, but in Dan Quayle's defense, the card that he had in front of him that was handed to him by the school or whatever it was spelled it wrong. It spelled it potato with an E. So he is just reporting what the card said without recognizing that, no, that is not how you spell potato singular. Anyway, like you run the risk of some of that stuff that, you know, like will something like Humanizer handle like if it's bottle of clean water, like sets of climbing equipment, will it handle that? I don't know. So like you could maybe use something like that. That could be hit or miss. I will say that this type of like getting the grammar right in all these different cases, especially if you're doing localization, like you want this in Spanish and German and Portuguese and whatever, that definitely complicates uh, definitely complicates how all this stuff is written, because like not every language uses the same scheme for pluralization. Um, I know some languages that have like it isn't just singular and plural. There's singular, dual, and plural. So if there's one, it's singular. If there's two, it's dual, and if it's more than that, it's plural. So anyway, a lot of weirdness when it gets to like some of that stuff, and that's why a lot of people will just like phrase like write it differently. They'll be like, um, they'll do something like cost 10 instead of like this costs $10, because when it's this and it's like one, like cost one is like way more likely to just be grammatically correct than this costs $1. And I mean, of course, you could also do that kind of thing, but like the ideal would be that this costs $1. Anyway, point is sometimes people will just like structure the text to avoid these issues, and that's not unreasonable. But of course, that's not like, I think the person who wrote this, where this code came from, the goal was, what if this sounds like natural human dialogue? And nobody says cost one. Like that's not how people speak. It's how computers speak because of these problems. So anyway, if you want it to feel super organic, natural, it's definitely more challenging. I was about to say, tying back into the chat GPT in the beginning, maybe that's a thing that AI could help with is, hey, AI, give me the text, like on the fly, like have the AI running within your program and say, generate a version of this that sounds natural. I just, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into AI in this video, but it it is it is a tool primarily aimed at making human readable, like human. It sounds like a human, not so much about correctness. And I've seen it make a lot of factual mistakes. I mean, right now there's a thing that's been going around about how these AI models don't know how many R's are in strawberry. How many R's are in strawberry? There's two, and there's actually three, and they all seem to get it wrong just because of how they're set up. Like it's not necessarily factual. So I would worry about that. Of if you had if you said, "Hey, we're trying to like act like a store owner, like give me the text that would say, you know, there's two bottles of clean water, and I how much what's the cost?" Maybe AI could do that, but I would also worry just a little bit that it would do something really weird or dumb, and I don't know. But maybe it's an interesting thought. Anyway, yeah, so I'm gonna not try and do any more than this. I think that's in terms of like plural versus singular. It could be done. Like I said, I would probably do the kind of brute force. Like if I've got, I would just have another switch here if I wanted to maintain that. I don't feel a need to maintain that. Um, but yeah, so we're good. I was gonna say like handling the bad input, except this right here. I just saw this. This is handling that. Like it literally is. Like if it's greater than or equal to 8, I guess it doesn't handle if it's less than, if it's 0. It also, like this, of course, doesn't handle if you typed in not a number, garbage. And again, like I said, that we will learn later on in the book the tools to handle all that stuff, and it's not too bad. But it uses like there is an int.tryparse that would work really well here. It's just it uses output parameters, and I don't think now is a great time to like that's a later conversation, not a right now conversation. So the only thing I'll say is like we have this check here and this check here. And what if we just did like I guess I'm thinking like if we flip this around, if we just do a while loop like this and just do then I don't think we need this if statement. So that's one level of indentation that we can get rid of, and I like that a lot. I also think like why have this variable? Up here we did it this way. Why not do the same thing and just do that? So now this line, oops, this line and this line are the same, and we might be able to clean that up too. Like I guess oh hey look, percentage key, here's another one of these. I think if we just do a break here, this press any key to exit console.readline environment.exit. If we just replace this with a break, that'll escape this outer loop, and it'll just come down here and do exactly that anyway. This is complaining about null. I really wish that readline did not state that it can return null. I mean, it actually makes sense, but like with the console, because the reason for this mostly comes down to, and like it's actually part of this description here. The next lines of the characters from the input stream or null if there's no more lines available. In the console window itself, it is actually really hard. I think you have to push like Control X or something like that in Windows. Control X and then Enter, and then you'll get a null coming out of it. On a different operating system, it might be a little easier, but it's like accounting for like a broader set of possibilities because it's an input stream, and streams are their own thing, and streams are more likely to have null come out of it than the console window. But like, it's like this gives me a warning here. It's like you might, a null might come out of this, but this doesn't allow null, and this says you better check this for null. But like, I don't want to. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to like, I really do feel like we just spend a couple more minutes on this. We can get rid of this duplication somehow. And I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to put that break on its own line. So either we're going to escape right here if they say, I don't want to see any of that. Oh, somehow I've added back in using directive for that code analysis. Do not want. Go away. Oh, I'm also going to, same thing as I said before. Let's just do it once. Let's just make sure that this C price is always lowercase no matter what. And then I don't have to check that down here. I do wonder, like that's the whole thing. Like if we just, I'm going to flip this around. Like this is a, like there's all these levels of indentation, right? And to just have more indentation, it makes it a little harder to read. It's usually indentation isn't so bad. It's just this is inside of this is inside of this is inside of this. What I want is, so if it's no, we're just going to be done. That's what the break does. If it's yes, we want to like ask them. Otherwise, we actually want to just say, like, if they didn't enter in anything useful, and we could say, if it's something else, then say, hey, I don't know. Like, you got to say yes or no. I don't know what you're talking about. We could do that. This code doesn't already do it, so I'm okay not doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so we've already, the options are it's yes, it's no, or it's none of the above. If it's yes, we do the meat of this. If it's no, we bail. If it's anything else, we just loop again and just ask them again. So what I'm going to do is just kind of flip the logic around here. And I'm just going to say if C price is not yes, continue. So if it's not yes, just go back and do it again, which is what it was already doing. But now this whole if statement, I can like remove the if and come way down here, remove the other curly brace, and unindent. I just hit selected the lines. I hit shift tab to like unindent everything. If you multiple lines are selecting, hit tab, the whole group will indent. Shift tab will just move it back. So now there's less indentation. It kind of like handles these two special cases. Like if it's no, we bail. If it's something weird, then like just try again. But in the normal case, like if they're opening up this program, they probably want to see this anyway. Then we're just going to march on through kind of the natural, the happy path, the normal stuff. Anyway, I did want to see if I could get rid of, I guess I feel like there's a way to say, I do need to declare this item selection ahead of time, but I feel like if maybe I move this back to a do while loop, make sure it runs once. And then I want to move this line up to here, and then say if item selection I'm trying to, I was going to say if item selection is greater than or equal to 8, tell them to try again. But again, I can remove this. Oops, not all of that, just this. And then move this into here. The problem is once again, this logic is duplicated. I see the same thing here and here. And I'm trying to think of a way to do that. I can think of a way. I don't know that I love this, but it is what I'm going to do. If item selection is less than 8, break. And now I can just turn that into a while true loop. I've been using a lot of those in this thing. I feel like I've used them. I like while true, and then like having a break to escape it is not uncommon. But I feel like I've just the nature of this particular like exercise has resulted in a lot of these while trues. Anyway, so now this says like if we've so I've inverted the logic. So we ask them for a thing, and then we get the response, and if they've entered in a valid value, we escape this loop and just go on to the next thing. Otherwise, we tell them, hey, that wasn't an option. And then we go back to the top of the loop. So like that's the whole loop. And the only way we escape it is if they've entered in something valid. No, so again, here's the reason why removing duplicate code is useful is when I had that condition in there multiple times, if I change my mind about what counts as valid, or this condition, this item selection less than 8, then I would have to maintain, I'd have to change the code in 2 different places, and 2 is not so bad. And frankly, in a program this size, we're down to 78 lines now. In a program this size, we could totally it's not so bad to just say I gotta change this twice. But the bigger the program gets, the harder it is to like maintain this like all these different copies of the same thing. So in a program that's 50, 100 lines long, you're not going to work on it forever. So the chances of like changing your mind in 3 months is low. The chances of remembering that I got to change this in 2 places is relatively high. And if you get it wrong, you're going to figure it out quickly and then just do it. But imagine if this weren't a 200 line, what is this? A 78 line program. Imagine if this isn't a 78 line program. Imagine it's a 7,800 line program that you've been working on for a couple of months. Those issues of maintenance and being able to change it easily, those get much more complicated, much harder challenges as your programs get a lot bigger. And by the way, that is like, it's something that comes up a lot. It's like, well, why am I like objects classes, like the whole object-oriented design stuff? Like sometimes people get done with part 2, which is all about objects classes, and they say, what, like, why would I use that? Like they aren't sold on the idea of all this object stuff. And it's the purpose of those tools. So just as you're working through the book, think about that. The purpose of those tools and the purpose of a lot of software design is to ensure that you can keep building the software at a relatively fast pace, even though the program is not just 50 lines anymore, that it's 5,000 lines or 50,000 lines. So it's all about these little things that make it so that you can change your mind about stuff over months, over years, and that you can still like manage all of this complexity. So managing change and managing complexity as the program grows over a long period of time. A lot of the stuff, especially in part 2, is about solving those problems. And we're not in part 2, so yeah. But even in like the details here, like this kind of thing, like if I have if I had this in there twice, that condition in there twice, and want to change my mind about it, I have to change the code twice. In this case, because like I do want to change it. I want to say if item selection is greater than 0 and item selection is less than 8. Break. What's this telling me to do? Oh, yeah. See this right here. I've complained about ChatGPT. I don't, like I said, it is a very useful tool. I don't want to like discourage people from using it, at least not like within reason. But it's not the only thing that'll be like, hey, you can do a different thing here. This is saying use patterns. So I'm gonna like merge into pattern. Poof. Like, I actually kind of like that version, but patterns are their own thing. And the only thing I'll suggest here is that you should not use code that you don't understand. You shouldn't just, I mean, like if you're sitting here saying, well, I know patterns, like this makes perfect sense to me. I know its limitations. I get it. And you just use the IDE to tell you, hey, you could change this. That's valid. Like, it's fine. But otherwise, if it doesn't make sense to you, or you're not understanding like the nuances or like complexities there, or the limitations, you're better off using code that you understand, because you have to. No one else will ever understand your code but you. Like, so if you're writing stuff that, like, I mean, like ChatGPT or like random stuff you find online, if you just take some code and just plop it in there, if you don't understand what you just pasted back into your code, the chances that someone else is gonna be like, oh well, yeah, it's this, or even you 3 weeks from now, if you don't know it when it goes in, then you're in trouble. So you should understand all of the code that you're writing, even if you got some help from ChatGPT or Stack Overflow or the editor. But if you make a change like that and you're like, I do not know what that just did, I have not learned that stuff, then either go learn it so that it does make sense, or just wait. And so I'm going to leave this like that. And like I said, now if somebody entered in a value less than 0, we will keep going on. And if they enter a value more than 8 or higher, if it's greater than 0 and less than 8. Yeah, that is correct. All right. I'm going to stop here. I've been going on for an hour and 8 minutes. I think we've simplified this a ton. I think there's more that we could simplify it. Like I said, to collapse these after we know about tuples or classes or something would like shorten up the total number of lines of code. That would be nice. I do think it's the same kind of thing here. That's like, these names are mirroring these names. So maybe it'd be nice to somehow like fold all of those together. That's not going to be easy with where we're at. I could need another switch, but I will say that again, if you had tuples, if you have like classes, and then maybe you have all of that and then put it into an array or a list, which is another topic we haven't gotten to yet. It might be really easy to just have a collection of all your items, and then like and they would manage their own cost, their own name, their own like description, and you just have a list of them, and then some of this code gets a lot easier. So there's definitely room once you learn more tools to simplify this even further, but I actually do like where this ended up at. I don't remember what it started out as. Hang on. It started out as 234 lines of code, but that included some white space and some comments and stuff like that. So this is definitely a lot shorter, and I hope it's a lot more. To me, this is a lot easier to understand. But again, like a lot of this comes down to what works for me may not work for you. Like there are going to be people who are going to say, no, I want the curly braces. I want this. Yeah. Last thought that I have on this is that I made a lot of changes. I also have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff too. So like if you didn't see these changes, like if you're like, there's no way I would have thought to do that, don't worry about it. Uh, there's going to be people out there who are going to watch this who are like, why he should have just done this other thing. And you're probably right too. Like, I can't, I just did some things that looked like reasonable, reachable things. For me, like I said, if you didn't come up with them all yourself, don't worry about it. We're again that going back to the beginning, personal journey. Everybody's on their own journey, and I'm in a totally different spot than everyone else. And so, frankly, ask me again tomorrow to do the same exercise, and I would have made some different choices anyway. Like I'm just looking at this, like, how do I feel about that? I'm okay with it, but I might not have made that same choice on a different day. I might have too, but so it's a yeah. Anyway, I do definitely think this code feels a lot less complicated, a lot less busy. Like I think we've achieved what we wanted to with this. It is a lot. There's a lot of the stuff that if we had methods, it'd be really easy to like reuse some of this. It'd be really easy to organize this in like different parts under different methods. Like I said, the tuples, the classes, like there's a lot of stuff here that would get easier if we had a full set of tools. But given the tools that we got in level 11 and the goals, I actually am pretty happy with this code. And I think we've talked about in this video a lot of different things that I hope are useful for people in terms of like, how do you keep code manageable, simple? So I hope this has been useful. This challenge, I mean, this specific thing with this loop and everything is not any challenge specifically, but this is a point in time where people are like, huh, my code's starting to get more complicated and I'm a little unsure about some things. And so I hope that some of these thoughts are useful to a large group of people. But anyway, that is plenty of rambling for me for one day. So I'm going to stop and be done. And good luck, and I'll see you guys next time.